Welcome! This one's a good one story. Like, subscribe, and let's go. Everyone in the community center gym knew Daniel. At just 24, Daniel was already a 5-time state karate champion. He was tall, fast, and confident in a way that made younger kids idolize him and older folks roll their eyes. He taught the Saturday self-defense class, mostly to high schoolers and nervous college students, but he treated it more like an audition for a movie role. He barked out moves like a drill sergeant and flexed every time he walked past a mirror. He was good, really good, but his ego filled the room like steam in a sauna, thick, hot, and suffocating. So when a new student arrived one damp April morning, dragging a duffel bag behind her and looking like she'd just come from a farmer's market instead of a dojo, Daniel didn't bother hiding his smirk. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, short and modestly built, wearing a loose gray hoodie and faded sweatpants. Her name was Nora. She didn't say much, just signed the waiver, bowed politely to the class, and took a spot in the far corner near the stack of mats. Daniel gave her a once-over, then shrugged her off like lint on his GI. "Okay, guys," he said, clapping his hands. "Let's warm up with some basic strikes. Nora, try to keep up, yeah?" Nora just nodded with a small smile. At first, no one noticed her. She moved quietly, stayed in the back, never asked questions. But there was something strange about how she held herself. Her movements were fluid, like she was conserving energy with each motion. Her feet barely made a sound on the mats. When the others stumbled through a new combination, she performed it like she'd done it 100 times. Still, she never corrected anyone, never drew attention to herself. And Daniel noticed. By week 3, his jokes got louder. "Come on, Nora, throw that punch like you mean it. Or are you planning to offer the mugger a granola bar instead?" The class chuckled. Nora didn't. She just repeated the drill, quietly and perfectly. The other students started whispering about her. Some were curious, others annoyed. A few of the girls, especially Marcy and Tina, Daniel's unofficial cheer squad, started mocking her during breaks. "She looks like she's here for a yoga class. Maybe she thought this was Tai Chi for seniors." But one student, Miguel, a shy 17-year-old who had started taking the class after getting jumped walking home from his part-time job, began watching Nora closely. One Saturday after class, while Daniel was chatting with a group of students near the water fountain, Miguel approached her. "Excuse me, Miss Nora?" he asked hesitantly. She looked up from tying her shoe, her expression kind and open. "Just Nora is fine." "Are you, like a black belt or something?" She laughed softly. "Number not, for a long time. But you move like you've done this before, a lot." Nora tilted her head, then nodded. "I used to train, yes, years ago." Miguel looked impressed, maybe even a little relieved. "You're really good." She smiled at him, her eyes softening. "So are you. You just don't believe it yet." That moment between them didn't go unnoticed. Daniel caught it from across the gym. His jaw tightened. He didn't like being upstaged, especially not by someone who looked like she should be folding laundry or baking banana bread. The next week, he made the warm-ups longer, the drills harder. He called on Nora more often. "Nora, demonstrate a front kick with me." She obliged. Her kick was sharp, fast, and controlled, maybe too good. Daniel frowned. "Let's make it interesting. How about a little sparring?" The class buzzed with interest. They hadn't done much sparring yet, mostly because Daniel preferred to keep the spotlight on himself. Nora hesitated. "I don't think that's necessary." "What's the matter?" Daniel smirked. "Afraid to sweat?" The class laughed, except for Miguel. He looked uneasy. Nora finally gave a quiet nod. They faced each other on the mat. Daniel bounced on his toes, cocky and loose. Nora stood still, arms relaxed at her sides. He threw the first jab, a light, probing punch. She didn't even flinch. He followed up with a sidekick, deliberately slow. She stepped aside, not with a block, but with a kind of grace that looked almost choreographed. Daniel's jaw twitched. "Come on, let's give the class a show." He lunged in with a flurry, nothing dangerous, just flashy. And then it happened. So fast that most of the class didn't register it until he was on the ground. Nora had sidestepped, caught his arm mid-swing, and with a smooth, circular motion, flipped him onto the mat. Flat on his back, a heavy thud, echoing across the gym like a drumbeat of truth. Silence. Even Daniel looked stunned, blinking up at the ceiling. He scrambled to his feet, face flushed. "Lucky shot," he muttered, brushing off his GI. But everyone had seen it. Miguel's jaw was hanging open. Marcy and Tina stared in disbelief. Nora bowed slightly. "Thank you for the demonstration." And then she walked back to her corner, picked up her bag, and sipped from her water bottle like nothing had happened. The class ended in a daze. Daniel skipped his usual post-lesson lecture. People filtered out quietly, whispering to one another. Only Miguel lingered, staring at the spot on the mat where Nora had dropped the champion like a sack of flour. Something had changed in that gym, something deep and irreversible, and Daniel knew it. The following Saturday, Daniel didn't show up. No explanation, no text, just a hastily printed sign on the door. Class will be led by a substitute instructor today. But the substitute was late. 30 minutes passed. Some students left. The rest stood around awkwardly, throwing half-hearted punches and scrolling through their phones. Until someone noticed Nora, quietly stretching in the corner. Miguel was the first to approach her. "Do you maybe want to show us some stuff while we wait?" Nora blinked. "I'm not a teacher." "You don't have to be," he said. "You're better than anyone here." She looked around. The few students remaining, Marcy, Tina, a lanky college guy named Jay, and 2 others, had all turned toward her. She hesitated, then stood. What followed wasn't a lesson in power. It was a lesson in presence. Nora didn't bark commands or pace like Daniel. She spoke softly, demonstrating with deliberate calm, encouraging them to move like water instead of bricks. She showed them how to root their stance, how to breathe through movement, how to stop fighting their own bodies. There was no posturing, no shouting, just quiet authority. Even Marcy stopped rolling her eyes. When the hour ended, the students clapped without thinking. A few asked if she would come back next week. Nora gave a gentle shrug. Only if Daniel's still missing? But Daniel wasn't missing. Not really. He was avoiding the fallout. At his apartment, he watched the class through the gym's grainy security feed, lips tight, arms crossed. He saw them laughing with her, saw Miguel mimicking her stance, saw Marcy nodding along instead of preening for attention. And it burned. He told himself it was no big deal. One lucky throw. She probably practiced that move in her garage for weeks. It didn't mean anything, but that wasn't the truth. And he knew it. Daniel had spent years building his image, strong, fast, untouchable, and in 10 seconds, a quiet woman had dismantled it like origami in the rain. By the 3rd week of his absence, the center director called him. "She's not staff," the director said over the phone. "You either come back or we find someone else." Daniel returned. But he wasn't the same. When he walked in, Nora was already on the mat, leading a group of students through a flowing drill she called soft defense. They all turned when he entered. Some looked relieved, others disappointed. "Look who finally showed up," Marcy muttered. Daniel kept his expression neutral. "Thanks, Nora. I'll take it from here." She nodded, bowed slightly, and stepped aside. But the room felt colder now. The same kids who used to laugh at his jokes were quiet. They followed his instructions, but not with the same energy. He tried to reclaim his tone of command, but it landed differently now, like someone trying too hard. And every time Nora moved, he felt that sick twist in his gut. Because she was better than him. Not faster, not stronger, but deeper, more rooted. Her movements didn't seek attention. They held something he didn't understand, something he'd never learned. That night, he stayed late after class. Nora was wiping down the mats. He approached her, arms crossed. "Where'd you learn that throw?" She looked up, Not defensive, just tired. Aikido. Years ago. He scoffed. Thought this was a karate class. I adapt, she said simply. There was no arrogance in her tone, and somehow, that made it worse. He stepped closer. Why are you here? Really? She paused. Does it matter? It does to me. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then she straightened, looking him directly in the eyes. I was once like you, she said softly. Fast, loud, certain. Daniel blinked. I trained to win, she continued, to impress, to control, until I lost something. Someone. Her voice dipped. My husband. He died protecting a stranger during a robbery. He didn't fight. He stepped between two people and gave his life. After that, I stopped training for glory. I started training for peace, and I never stepped into a dojo again. Daniel stood frozen. Until I saw your class. Loud, rushed, fear-based, and I thought, maybe someone here needed something else. She turned away, picking up her bag. Daniel couldn't move. The story had landed in him like a slow knife, cutting not with rage, but with shame. He wasn't angry anymore. He was lost. As Nora walked out of the gym that night, Daniel stayed behind, staring at the mat where he'd once ruled without question. And for the first time in years, he sat down, not to stretch, not to pose, but to think. To really think. Daniel didn't show up for class the next week. But this time, no one was surprised. Nora tried not to read into it. She wasn't there to take anything from anyone. She came in, taught what she knew, and left. That's how she kept her balance. Her center. She'd spent years rebuilding it. But something about the last conversation with Daniel had stayed with her. The grief in his voice, not loud, not even spoken directly, just barely tucked beneath his question. Why are you here? She had told him the truth, or part of it. She hadn't told him about the nights after her husband's death, how she would lie on the kitchen floor in silence, staring at the ceiling fan, feeling like the air had stopped moving. She hadn't told him that she quit martial arts because every movement reminded her of how little control we truly have, that her husband Joseph had been strong too, kind, brave, and still gone. She hadn't told him how terrified she was of stepping back into a world where violence had once meant empowerment, until it meant loss. But she could see Daniel breaking, and she wasn't sure what to do with that. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, when class was over and the last of the students had gone home, that she found him again. He was waiting outside the gym, leaning against the building in the dark. His face was different, softer, tired. You planning on sneaking out the side again? He asked, forcing a smile. Nora adjusted the strap on her duffel bag. Didn't think you'd want to see me. I didn't, he admitted. At least, not for a while. She nodded, waiting. I've been teaching for years, he went on, voice low. But I never really learned, you know? Nora tilted her head, listening. My dad put me in karate when I was 8, he said. I was small, scared, used to get jumped on the way home from school. But when I won my first tournament, everything changed. People stopped picking on me. I felt seen, respected. He laughed bitterly. I got addicted to it, that feeling. I thought if I kept winning, I'd never feel weak again. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just honest. But when you dropped me, he said finally, it wasn't just my body that hit the mat. It was everything I believed about myself. Nora stepped closer, eyes kind. That's not a bad thing, Daniel. He looked at her, confused. You're not weak, she said. You're just not done learning. None of us are. He swallowed hard. Why are you really here, Nora? She took a deep breath. Because I wanted to feel safe again. Not from others, but from myself. From what I'd become after Joseph died. He didn't say anything, just stared at the pavement. Then he asked, "Will you teach me?" Her eyes widened slightly. "I don't mean in class," he said quickly. "I mean really teach me. The way you move, the way you think, the peace part." Nora was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded once. From that moment on, everything changed. They began meeting outside of class, early mornings in the park, before the sun rose, in an empty corner of the community center at night. She showed him drills he'd never practiced. Not flashy ones, internal ones. How to breathe, how to center, how to fall and get back up without shame. He was terrible at first, clumsy, frustrated, but she was patient. She never mocked him, never rushed him. And slowly, Daniel began to feel something shift. His body loosened, his instincts softened. He started to listen more than he talked. Students noticed. His voice in class became steadier, less performative, more instructive. When Miguel messed up a combination, Daniel didn't roll his eyes. He knelt beside him and said, "You're stronger than you think. Just let it come through." Miguel beamed for hours afterward. Even Marcy began showing up early to stretch. And then one day, midway through a drill, Daniel stopped the class. "I have a favor to ask," he said. Everyone turned. "I want Nora to lead today." The class erupted into murmurs. Nora's eyes widened slightly. "I've learned more from her in 2 months than I did in 5 years," Daniel said simply. "I'd be an idiot not to share that with you." Nora stepped forward slowly. The room fell silent, and she began. Her voice was calm, but filled with strength. She led them through a series of movements that told a story, one of grounding, protection, and trust. She taught them how to move with intention, how to react without panic, how to turn fear into flow. Midway through the class, Miguel asked the question everyone had been thinking. "Nora, could you teach us how you flipped Daniel that day?" She laughed, genuinely, warmly. Then she nodded, "Only if he's willing to volunteer again." Everyone turned to Daniel. He smirked, bowed, and took the mat. Nora faced him. They locked eyes. This time, it wasn't a showdown. It was a conversation between bodies, a lesson. And when she moved, just as fluid, just as quiet, he didn't resist. He went with it. He landed on the mat with grace. The students cheered, laughing and clapping, not because someone lost, but because something had been shared. Respect, vulnerability, growth. Daniel sat up, breathless, smiling. "Okay, maybe not luck after all." Nora extended her hand to help him up. This time, he took it. A year later, the Saturday morning class at the community center didn't look anything like it used to. The mirrors had been cleaned, the mats replaced, and the mood was different. Calmer, more focused. Laughter still echoed through the gym, but it wasn't laced with arrogance or posturing anymore. It was real, relaxed, whole. And in the center of it all stood Nora. She didn't teach every class, but she was the heart of the room. Her presence changed things. Students came early just to help her set up. They stayed after to ask about techniques that had less to do with fighting and more to do with life, like how to breathe through a panic attack, how to carry themselves into a difficult conversation, how to stop flinching from memories they couldn't forget. Daniel stood beside her now, not above her. They co-taught. Sometimes she led, sometimes he did. They had learned to move together the way sparring partners do, not to defeat, but to sharpen, to learn. Miguel was now one of the most promising students. At 18, he had more confidence in his stance than he ever had in his voice. But he no longer mumbled. He looked people in the eye. His parents had come to watch him a few times. One of those days, he cried afterward. Nora just hugged him and said, "Sometimes strength shows up after the storm." Tina and Marcy had stayed too. Without the constant pressure to impress or compete, they began to grow into something softer, more grounded. They weren't the mean girls anymore. They were protective of the new students, kind, especially to those who walked in quiet, like Nora once had. And then there was the moment no one saw coming. At the end of one particular class, Daniel pulled out a small framed photo and placed it on the windowsill above the mats. The photo was of a man in a simple suit, mid-laugh, standing next to a small tree with pink blossoms behind him. The class quieted. "This," Daniel said, "is Joseph." He glanced over at Nora. She gave him the smallest nod. "I never met him," Daniel continued, "but I wouldn't be here without him. None of us would." He cleared his throat. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who throw punches. They're the ones who step between them, who walk into chaos with open hands and unshakable hearts. The class bowed their heads. A few wiped tears. Afterward, Nora stood alone at the photo, running her fingers lightly over the frame. Daniel walked up beside her. "I hope that was okay," he said quietly. She smiled, her eyes wet. It was perfect. They didn't speak for a moment. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after something true is said. "You know," Daniel added, "I used to think respect was earned through dominance, but now I think it's more about humility, about listening." Nora chuckled softly. "Then I'd say you've earned a lot more than respect." He gave a small grin. "Still can't believe you flipped me like that." She looked at him teasing. "I let you off easy." They both laughed. As the students gathered their bags and filtered out into the warm afternoon sun, one of the newer girls, probably 16, wearing oversized sweats and earbuds, paused in the doorway. She turned back, looking shy. "Miss Nora?" she asked. Nora turned. "Yes?" "Do you think someone like me could ever be strong like you?" Nora smiled. She walked over and gently took the girl's hand, turning it palm up. Then she placed her own hand over it, light but steady. "You already are," she said. "You just haven't seen it yet." The girl's eyes lit up, her shoulders lifted. And just like that, a new story began. Because strength isn't always loud. It's not always obvious. Sometimes it sits in the corner of the room, stretching quietly. Sometimes it moves without sound. And sometimes it steps forward only when the world needs reminding that power and peace are not opposites, but partners. Nora never sought revenge. She never needed recognition. She just needed to come back to herself. And when she did, she changed everything, one quiet move at a time.